Well, there seems to be some conflicting messages from the Trump administration on North Korea. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson admitting there is direct communication between the U.S. and Kim Jong-un's regime, raising the possibility of diplomatic talks with Pyongyang amid the heightened nuclear tensions. This after he met with Chinese leaders yesterday in Beijing. But you know, today, President Trump raised some eyebrows by tweeting this, quote, "I told Rex Tillerson, our wonderful Secretary of State, that he is wasting his time trying to negotiate with little rocket man." Then he added, "Save your energy, Rex. We'll do what has to be done." Judy Miller, adjunct fellow at the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research, Pulitzer Prize-winning author and journalist and Fox News contributor, joins us now. So, Judy, it seems the president is contradicting his Secretary of State. So what are you to make of this?
Well, you know, Eric, with Donald Trump, it's always hard to tell. But rather than leap to conclusions, let me posit a kind of benign explanation, which is perhaps Donald Trump is sending out deliberately mixed messages. Perhaps he wants to be the bad cop and let Rex Tillerson, his Secretary of State, who's been trying to get these back channel talks going, and by the way, something seems to be going, as he himself said, so that you have a yin-yang, good cop, bad cop. That's the positive or the benign explanation. There are several other competing explanations. One is that Secretary Tillerson, whom everyone has been rumored to be on the way out for a long time, is now getting the Tom Price treatment, the humiliation, the not-so-subtle tweet push from the president, softened by the blow of wonderful Secretary of State. But it could also be that Donald Trump has just been spending too much time at the 19th hole of his golf course. I mean, we really don't know because it's President Trump.
Well, let's say it's the first explanation, which in some ways seems
right.
it seems to make sense, because here you have Tillerson and Beijing meeting with the leaders, and you got the president. It's like the guy, you know, behind you saying, you know, if you don't work something out, you know, I got the big baseball bat. And we have a tweet from the State Department, Heather Nauert, today, which says that basically this is a message, it seems, directly to Kim Jong-un. It says diplomatic channels are open, but they won't be forever. So that's not a subtle message to, you know, stop your behavior and sit down and perhaps talk.
It's not a subtle message, Eric, and we have seen these mixed messages before. Remember Secretary of Defense Mattis saying that we have, quote, military options available to us. No one seems to know what those might be that wouldn't harm the people of South Korea or endanger our troops in South Korea or Japan. But the problem with North Korea is, and here I have to give President Trump a break, he inherited this mess from a succession of Republican and Democratic presidents who have tried to solve the Korea problem and haven't been able to do so. And we have a young, brash, 33-year-old dictator who's racing ahead in his military program to try and get a weapon that the United States will have to pay attention to as an instrument of regime survival. So let's just hope that those who say that Mr. Kim is actually intent on self-preservation as opposed to suicide, let's just hope they're right. But let's stand back also and ignore for the moment the president's tweets and look at what's happening on the ground. At long last, there seem to be some back-channel talks going on. This would be a good thing because, as Rex Tillerson said, everyone, and I assume he means the president and that as well, needs to lower the temperature a bit.
But, you know, Judy, the talks, and there's a point. You talked about the president inheriting this. I mean, he just had a tweet within the last hour. Expressing that exact situation. This is what he says. He says, being nice to Rocket Man hasn't worked in 25 years. Why would it work now? Clinton failed, Bush failed, and Obama failed. And he adds ominously, I won't fail. I mean, look, you had the six-party talks. 1994, the oil for food deal with the Clinton administration, in which they took a lot of oil and money and totally lied and continued their program. And even President George W. Bush, as a sign of generosity, perhaps, took them off the State Department list of terrorism, sponsors of terrorism. And look what we got. So doesn't the president have a point, absent, potential war?
I think the president does have a point on this. Nobody knows how to handle North Korea. And if the president is sending mixed messages deliberately, then I think this message, Eric, and I hope you'll agree with me on this, is aimed just as much at China as it would be at North Korea. Because China, I continue to believe, is enormously influential in terms of what Mr. Kim decides to do. Now, I'm not saying that the Chinese can tell the North Koreans what to do. Clearly, they don't seem to have that ability. But they can make life very painful should they choose to do so.
Well, do you think they've made
Kim
it
Jong-un and his regime?
Do you think they've made it painful enough? I mean, they have taken some steps. We saw that at the UN 2 weeks ago. You know, they're going to cut off the banks that do business with North Korea. They're shutting down North Korean companies. They're apparently doing something with the oil to stop some of the oil trade, 30% or so, but not 100%. Do you think Beijing can do? Clearly, they can do more. How do we get them to do that?
Well, perhaps you get their attention by scaring them to death and making them think that President Trump is truly capable of going down the military path.
Do you think Tillerson mentioned that?
That might actually scare them into.
Do you think Tillerson, I mean, that's the type of conversation he had yesterday with Chinese leaders saying, you know, he's sitting there saying, look, the boss is tweeting this stuff. This is what he thinks. You know, if you can read lips between them, between President Xi and Mr. Tillerson right there, there he is. He looks over and goes, he's tweeting. This is what he really believes. You got to really put the screws onto Kim Jong-un. If you don't do something, pal, you're really in trouble.
You need both. You need Kim Jong-un to decide that the price for his nuclearization and missile program is too high, and you need China to determine that the price in terms of its relationship with the United States is too high if it lets Kim Jong-un continue down this path. This is a truly difficult foreign policy challenge, and I tend to give the president more leeway and be less judgmental on this issue than I am on many others, precisely because of what we've been talking about, the failure of every other administration to change North Korea's calculus and thinking.
And finally, I mean, what if that doesn't work? I mean, look, Kim supposedly ordered the murder of his half-brother and his uncle because they were sympathetic to the Chinese point of view, it is said.
Well, it's at that moment that I'm glad that I'm a humble or not so humble journalist and don't have to make the very difficult decision about what President Trump will decide to do.
We will be waiting and watching and certainly hope this can be solved in a peaceful manner. Judy Miller, always good to see you.
Certainly so.
Of course.